Waffle69 here, and welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are starting a brand new down the line video series, and we will be going down the Poison battleship line, which is what the German, I guess you could call it the main battleship line. Back in the day, it used to be crowned by the Großer Tier first, but now it is crowned by the Poison. And right off the gates, or right off the get-go, I have to say this. I think this ship line in particular is played criminally wrong, and I think set up criminally wrong, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in regards of these battleships and how to them, I guess, how to stay relevant in the current meta of the game. Obviously, we've come a long way since these ships have been added to the game. I think these ships were added way back in there. I want to say like 2016-ish, 2017. Maybe even earlier. I don't even remember. I can't recall like an exact date, but it's been a long time coming for these ships, and they have definitely aged a lot. Back in the day, I guess we could call these ships like the brawling battleships of World of Warships. And now, since since they were back then when they were added, we've had numerous amounts of battleship lines added to the game that have actually had more, I guess, a sole focus on brawling and especially those juicy secondaries. So I definitely want to take my time on this line and talk a lot about how I actually set them up and play them. Some different concepts, some different ways to play these ships, but the main way that I find them to be competitive in the current meta, which is kind of a caveat or kind of a trick question because these ships in general, I think, have been power crept to living hell and kind of fail to have a sole role in the game. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. But the first things I want to apologize is being kind of gone for a little bit. I've been very busy here the last couple days. I know it's been like 5 or 6 days that I've been able to put out a video, so bear with me, guys. My schedule should be freeing up here in the next couple of days where I can start churning and burning here like I usually do. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, enough about that. Let's just keep going about the German BBs and talk about them, kind of do the port analysis here, kind of dig under the hood and kind of see what makes these ships tick. But one thing that I always do when I start these down the line series is I kind of want to say why I start at tier 5, because as you know, I think the von der Ton starts this line off at tier 3, and you know there is no 3, there is no 4. We're right here at tier 5 with the Koenig. There is a reason why I choose tier 5 as kind of the basis of where I start all my down the line series videos, and it's for multiple reasons, but I guess for main 2 reasons. One, I think the gameplay as a whole really evolves and changes when you reach tier 5. Some would say more tier 6, but I would say tier 5. You really become less of a shooty boats kind of game where you're throwing rainbow HE shells down range and focusing more kind of on strategy. Now, again, that's how the game is supposed to be played. There are still a bunch of players who think that's the way this game is played, and they're still going to do that. And we see them creep their way up to tier 10, and you hate to see those kind of players on your team. But tier 5 for me is the main tier where the strategy or the gameplay really evolves and turns into something more. Number 2, my second reason for why I start at tier 5 is the matchmaker with the +2, -2 matchmaking. You no longer have protected matchmaker here at tier 5. At tier 4, you do. At tier 5, no way. So now you could be thrown in tier 7 games. You know, if you're a 6, you get thrown into 8 and vice versa, right? All that kind of stuff. As you know on my channel, I'm not a big fan of the +2, -2 matchmaker. I think a lot of problems in World of Warships could be solved in regards of balancing if they would just solely reduce it to +1, -1. I also think the fun factor of the game would go increase substantially for players, and I also think the learning curve of the game would be a little bit more forgiving. As someone who went through +2, -2 matchmaker, 8 years ago, I can assure you I do not care if they made this change and they went through with it, because I do think it would be more fun in whole. I mean, we all know you're a tier 8 cruiser in a tier 10 game and you just get one shot and overmatched to living shit. Granted, there are the players that manage to do well, and they're probably going to defend and be up in arms saying, well, if you're up tier to 2, +2, -2, +2. You have to play more conservative and blah blah and so and so. And you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying in regards of how to play the games, but I'm saying as a whole, I think the whole double up tier is just cringe, and I really don't enjoy either side of it. I don't really enjoy the overwhelming challenge of it. I think it's kind of a shit thing to be doing to people, especially when they're grinding for fuck's sakes. And I especially don't like it when I'm a top tier ship and I nuke a tier 8, cruiser or whatever. It's like, it doesn't, there's no satisfaction because I'm totally power creeping that son of a bitch out of existence, and there is nothing he can do. There are other ships that up tier better than most, or that better than some, but I'd say for the vast majority, I think it's really they don't do too well when they're double up tier, right? We can all agree on that. But anyways, that rant out of the way. Let's focus on the Kiernik here at tier 5, and let's get into it by making sure I remove all the signal flags so that I don't hurt my statistics when I'm reading them. So first thing, we're going to look at the armor layout, guys. And actually, I will be one of those guys that says this is a great armor layout. As you can see, you do have a 19 millimeter nose, you do have a 19 millimeter ass, but a 20 millimeter deck. But you have also a 19 millimeter deck on the nose. The armor layout actually isn't terrible, as you do have this 150 millimeter icebreaker. What's always funny about this, so when you go down to like these dreadnought stages, as we know, Yamatos are, the Yamato, not Yamatos, but Yamato is famous for overmatching 32 millimeters of armor. So theoretically speaking, the Yamato can't even overmatch the icebreaker of a tier 5 battleship. I think it's hilarious. But anyways, then we have, special plating here with 200 millimeters on the fore end armor belt, and we're going to about 350 at the main armor belt, with the midsection deck being around 30 millimeters, which is great for HE spam mitigation. If we look at the armor scheme of the Citadel, we can see that there is kind of a bit of sloped armor. I wouldn't necessarily call this a turtleback, so to speak, but the angles are sloped, so it's going to be difficult to Citadel this thing reliably, especially at lower tiers where the penetration just isn't up to snuff with it is up to like, at tier 8, 9, and 10s, right? And then you do have a Citadel that is waterline as well. So can it be Citadel? Absolutely, it can be at the right angles, plunging fire, etc. But more often than not, you're basically going to be pretty damn well armored. So don't expect to eat too many Citadels in the Koenig, and then keep moving up this line. As you know, this line is very, very famous for having the turtleback armor scheme, which is making it the closer you get to the ship, the harder and harder and harder it's going to be to Citadel the battleship, which is great for in close and brawling. When you are at ranges, though, plunging fire is still a factor and can still very much Citadel the ship if hitting at the right angle. So keep that in mind. One other thing I want to talk about the armor scheme, as you can see, it kind of has like this weird like sloped casemate secondaries. This is something common we see in naval architecture around the World War I era. Know that I like to call these shell catchers, and you will actually see plunging shells or shells strike these casemate secondaries and get full pens. So you have to be careful with the way this is. This is kind of like a flaw in the whole of the design. Don't get me wrong, the hull is still pretty damn tanky, and it reflects that in game very well, but you will see occasionally if you're coming in like this, people will shoot and land shells here that will get full pens. They won't get ricochets. So just keep that in mind, guys. Going into her survivability, she does clock in at the 47,100 mark, and this is pretty much standard for the ship. It's pretty much middle of the pack with a lot of these battleships at tier 5. Nothing too special about that. Again, coming in with a 22% torpedo protection damage reduction, again, which is super nice. Now going into the artillery, one thing I have to say always, I always talk about the gun firing angles, especially when it comes to ships in general, but especially battleships, right? That number 3 turret, so the one right here in the middle, this one is a bit of a pain to get on target. And I do find the gun firing angles to be rather lackluster. You are exposing a fair amount of broadside in order to get all 5 of your turrets, also all 10 guns to bear. Again, that is exposing you enough to eat those juicy penetrations from your enemies. So please, please, please keep that in mind. You do have armor mitigation, which is going to help mitigate a lot of this stuff, but you will again eat those penetrations if you're not careful. It always is good to note when and where enemy battleships are locked onto you and firing at you, and where enemy destroyers are at all times. With these 305 millimeter guns, which you do have 5 times 2 turret arrangement for a total of 10 guns. They are reloading in 26 seconds. 26 seconds, which I believe are the fastest firing 305 millimeter battleship guns at this tier. And this is why I build my ship for, I guess you could say like a tank build, more main guns rather than into secondaries. And I will talk about secondaries here in a little bit. I want to stay more on the main guns as of right now. We do have a 180-degree turn time of 51 seconds. These are pretty slow, so make sure you have your turrets pre-aimed where you want to aim, right, on the ship, and position them accordingly, because again, when you get in too close, these turrets are going to be kind of a pain in the ass in order to swivel around and kind of get them to bear. I did find myself a couple times in those scenarios, and it was a pain in the ass, so just keep that in mind. Standard dispersion on this thing, it's a bit of interesting when we talk about the dispersion of the Koenig. You are coming in on a sigma of 1.9 with your, I believe at max range, you have 16.5 kilometer max range, which is clocking in at a horizontal dispersion of 230 meters with a vertical dispersion of 139 meters. These guns are just, they don't feel too good. Your AP damage is only clocking in, I believe, around 8,000 standard right across the board. The guns feel a little bit underwhelming to me at times, but one way I found to make them feel a little bit more reliable and a little bit more rewarding is actually in that number 3 slot for your upgrades, taking the Aiming Systems Mod 1, which is going to decrease your dispersion by, I believe, -7%. Highly recommend that. Highly, highly, highly recommend that, guys. It is something that I think a lot of players, when they see German battleships now, they just immediately gravitate towards the secondary mounts, and I think you're really limiting the ship's potential, especially with a 26-second reload, if you are building for the secondaries, guys. The maximum damage on the high explosive shells are clocking in at 3,300 damage with a 23% fire chance, which again isn't bad. And they do have the 76 millimeters of HE penetration. Now, someone has to correct me. I think these get the quarter pen. If not, then that's my bad. I should know better. I should have done my research a little bit more. But that is something that German ships have. They have those quarter pen HE across the board. So again, it could be very well may be that, right? With the armor piercing shells, like I already said, have about 8,000 damage exactly, and that's base. And that's, again, pretty standard. I think that's around ranked like 5 to 2 or something like around there. I think the Proctor V Kelly is the only one that's coming in at number 1 with like 9,000 and some change or something like that. It's crazy. Shell velocity is 850 meters a second, which is for the HE and the armor piercing. So again, you should pretty standard for battleships, I'd say. I said there's nothing you really have to like take extra lead or anything like the American battleships, for example, right? Going to the secondary mounts, they are reloading in 3.4 seconds. These are the 105s millimeter guns, which have the 4x2, and they also have the 150s, which are the 14x1. For the 105s, they have maximum range of about 5.2 with about a 5% chance to cause a fire with 1,200 HE damage, and they are penning 26 millimeters effective armor. So this is with the quarter pen. It does have it on this ship. The 150s do have 8.6 seconds with a 5.2 kilometer range with 1,800 maximum damage with a 10% chance to cause a fire with 38 millimeters of HE penetration. Now, here comes the big, I guess, addressing the elephant in the room. Do you build secondaries for the Koenig, and how do you feel about secondaries on the Poison line? Okay, this is my opinion too, and this is very much going to help you guys out when you are grinding this line, and this line specifically. I would not build secondaries for these ships at all, from 5 to 10. I think your guns, as you have a smaller amount of them, you need the help on the guns. The guns are not consistent enough, very inaccurate, and if you're building for secondaries even more, you're throwing your massive ton of steel up there against other ships, such as rapid fire HE spammers. You're going against Libertads. You're going to be going against Schlieffens down with this line with the Poison and stuff. It's one of those things that I just think it's outdated. It's if anyone's telling you to build secondaries for your mainline German battleships, I would really much question what they're trying to teach you and try to tell you. For a fun factor, is there fun to be had occasionally from game to game, and it's very matchmaker dependent, as we can all agree on that. But for consistently, if you want to have decent results in these German BBs, you're gonna have to kind of get rid of that mindset of you are a secondary brawler, because you were very much not. Now here's my number 2 recommendation. If you are keen on building secondaries, okay, again, this is your prerogative. You can build secondaries if you so choose. This is what I would tell you. From tier 5 to tier 8, you can get away with it. I think very much so. You can get away with building full secondary builds, full swing on the secondaries with 5 through 8. So that's the Koenig, that's the Bayern, the Gneisenau, and the Bismarck. I think you were fine with that. Given that you are top tier. Once you get to the Frederick de Gross and the Preußen, I think you are very much griefing yourself and your teammates if you're building for full secondaries. And I'll show some examples of that why. And again, when we climb, go down this line together, I'll show more and more highlights of why I don't think secondaries are the way to go. Okay. And number 3, what are these ships very, very good at? I would usually like to say they're good at damage mitigation, but as we know, when you're spotted from Nam or you're very detectable, you're just going to soak up a lot of enemy fire and damage, and I just don't think it's going to be fun for you. I see a lot of Battleship players that play these things that either full send it in there and die and they're first blooded, or they're so scared to take damage that they're in the back of the map sniping. Both are horrendous playstyles, and I highly would not recommend playing like that for both of them. Again, you have to read the map and the scenario, but generally speaking, I would try to model these ships on how to play them like the Montana. I think the German battleships nowadays try to play or should try to play more similar to that of a Montana rather than playing more like a Schlieffen or a Libertad or ships like that. It would be stupid because again, you're not really sniping in your Montana in these battleships, right? Because we did that down the line series. Your shell velocity is just not good enough really to reliably hit your shells at range. You're playing at that medium distance, right? Really supporting your allies, and I think that's where these ships are going to be, at their best, is going to be at that medium range as well. Again, as the game progresses, as you push in, as the numbers get smaller from on both sides, on both teams, that's when you can get more aggressive with these ships. But in the beginning of the game, I would say you're definitely playing passive, guys, because if you get in there with these, massive turning circle radiuses and long as rudder shift times and how detectable you are, you're not going to be able to disengage in these things. So once you're in, you are in. Okay, so keep that in mind. Obviously, we're going to go to the A defenses. Really not worth talking about. The A is horrendously bad on this thing. Tier 6 carriers are going to have their way with you. Just my recommendation is you just got to tolerate, sadly, and group up with your allies. Looking for Dallases, I'm looking at you. Q to Quinn, or whatever the hell they're called for the Dutch. Those ships are the ones you're going to want to hang around if they're on your team. If not, then good luck. Okay, going into the maneuverability of the ship, always good to talk about here. Coming in with a rudder shift time of 13.2 seconds with a maximum speed of 24 knots and a turning circle radius of 620. Not terrible on the turning circle radius, I believe. The rudder shift time is fairly high. And again, the max speed of 24 knots. Hey, it's not New Mexico, it's not New York. At least you have, you can get from point A to point B at a reasonable amount of time. But again, it's just how this tier is. You're a little bit on the slower side, Not bad though, right? Not bad. Going to the concealment values of the ship is 14.1 kilometers. Now listen, I do not recommend specking concealment expert, the commander skill. I think those points could be allocated or better allocated elsewhere. In just my opinion and what I've seen, I just think 14.1 is already good enough. You don't need to really get much lower than that. You're really not going to benefit from it, especially because Tier 6 and aircraft carriers and Tier 6 submarines are just so prevalent. You're not really going to be able to take advantage of your concealment with those numbers. So I would highly recommend you stay away from that and put into skills that are going to help. Damage mitigation is probably your best bet because these ships are coated in kerosene and you will be lit ablaze constantly. So fire prevention is going to be a must. And emergency repair splashes, I believe, is another one that I would take. And obviously adrenaline rush to give you all your ship stats a little bit of a boost and some love because you're going to take damage. If you're not taking any damage in these ships, I just think you're inherently playing these ships wrong. So anyways, guys, that is the Koenig in a nutshell in the port view. I really enjoyed my time with the Koenig. I thought she was fun, though I can see where the frustrations arise. But the number one thing I definitely want to talk about with her is that 26 reload. You can catch a lot of players off guard. They don't realize how fast you actually do reload in this thing, and you can really punish a lot of broadsides with this, especially cruiser players who are trying to time their turnouts. This thing can definitely punish. But the problem is, if you don't take the aiming systems, good luck trying to punish reliably because it's so inconsistent. Again, which is a balancing factor. I'm not saying it's not, but for us players that want a little bit more consistency of our battleships rather than just secondary brain dead brawling, then I'm telling you, the way I have it set up in port is the way you want to build your ship. Obviously, there's some skills you can interchange like expert loader. incoming fire alert. You can, those are 2 points you can allocate maybe to a number 2 skill if you want to. You can move some stuff around, but the one that I laid out was just a basic foundation or a basic guideline that really allowed me to elevate my Koenig gameplay. Obviously, the commander you saw in here was from my previous build. I was trying another build out to make sure that it was like not the build that I recommend. But for the full 21 point commander, which I actually do have on the Koenig, but I do bounce him around. Sadly, I know I'm one of those guys now. Choose now just with this one ship. I don't really do it all the time. It was actually relatively a blast. I did have a fun time with it, and it can catch a lot of players, like I said, off guard. So, anyways, enough talking about this Koenig in the port screen. Let's see what you can do in battle. Alrighty guys, here we are in battle. This is actually the first of 2 battles I am going to showcase for you guys here in the Koenig. I do like to do the whole double battle feature in regards of my tier 5 when I start a new down the line series, because I feel like this is the foundation. I'm setting the foundation for the entire line, and I think you're learning a lot too with the tier 5. And again, I highly cannot stress this enough, highly recommend you do not free XP your way past ships. And I know there are a lot of doozies out there, my guys. There are a lot of doozies. But if you do that, you're directly handicapping yourself. And skipping tiers are not going to, they're not, you're skipping basic knowledge of what those tiers or those ships are trying to teach you. And then you're just griefing your teammates when you go up the ranks and you're trying to fly up the way to the tier 10. Because I'm promising you, I cannot promise you enough that the gameplay is any more fun at tier 10 than it is down here. Some people would disagree with me, and that's okay. That's okay. It's good to be that way. It's good to say that. But again, very matchmaker dependent for the fun factor in this game. And again, random battles, the current state of random battles is kind of a wish-wash anyways. Sometimes you're happy with your team dominates. Sometimes you're mad at your teammates because they're shit. It happens. That's the state of random battles, guys. And that's the state of a free-to-play game. And you know what? We all endure it. We're all a part of it. So all we can do is improve our gameplay so that we ourselves can have fun and help our teams out, right? So anyways, so a couple tips that I have with the Koenig right off the get-go, especially when I think I am up tier. Yeah, I'm up tiered by 2 in this game. First things first, when you check the loading screen, when you're loading into battle, and you see your double up tiered, which is what this game is, you're going to have to play way more passive. And especially when it comes to German battleships, I think up to about the Bismarck, and even then I'd say the Bismarck too, when you're double up tiered, so that's the Bismarck going to tier 10, so the Kearney going to tier 7, Bayern going to 8, Gneisenau going to what, 9. Do not be afraid to load the HE. Just because we're battleships and we should be taking those AP salvos every now and then, and because our HE is pretty anemic, to say the least, right? Like, you have the improved penetration, but at the end of the day, like, your damage is very lackluster. The worst HE damage, I believe, for battleships at this tier. Let me just double check. It's the Derflinger with 100 less. So you have 3,300. The Derflinger has 3,200. Even with the worst damage, your HE is still going to set fires. It's going to break, incapacitate modules. It's just going to be a little bit better because the armor at the levels are going to be like ricocheting your AP shells a lot. So you're going to have to be careful. And just how it is, armor is just going to increase, the higher and higher the tiers you go up, right? So, and because we don't have overmatch, realistically speaking, at this tier, loading HE is not a bad option, especially when you're picking up 76 millimeters of HE penetration. Now, I'm not saying load the HE right off the get-go, but I'm saying what I am saying is don't be afraid to switch to HE on certain situations. You're definitely an AP focused line. You definitely want to be shooting AP, I would say 95% of the time in this thing. But for those 5% of times, don't be afraid to press that one key and load the HE, guys. So that's my first tip with this thing. My second tip with this thing is, yes, you have 16.5 kilometer range, but you have access to the spotter aircraft in your third consumable slot, because the 3 consumables you have is your damage control party, your heal, and your spotter plane. Please don't use the fighter, use the spotter plane. And the reason why you want to use the spotter plane is so that you can extend that range and you get double up tiered, that you can make up for your less than average range when you're up tier, right? Again, we're trying to play smarter, not harder when we get double up tiered with the Koenig. And that's pretty much a basis statement for every ship that gets double up tiered. And that is why I'm choosing actually to not go out to the flank. I'm actually choosing to go more towards the middle because I see that the enemy team is doing exactly what I would have done if I was top tier. So again, we're taking full advantage of broadsides as they're going to be exposing their broadside while sailing towards the decap, like this New Mexico is so handsomely doing for us. But there's going to be a good example coming up here to showcase if you don't aim your AP salvos right, how you're just going to get nothing but shatters and ricochets because the penetration on the ship can be kind of hit or miss. I do believe the AP penetration, if we are going and talking about her, at maximum range, you're getting around anywhere between 289 to 279 millimeters of effective AP penetration. But mainly when you're firing AP, let's say for across the board standard, around like 13 to 15 kilometers. At 13 kilometers, you're raking up to about 323 millimeters of penetration. So you want to play around that medium distance because then you are getting enough AP penetration to reliably smoke enemy ships. And that's what we're looking to do. You got an impact speed around 559 meters a second at that as well, which is super nice. And again, with the drag coefficient and the flight time of only around, again, it varies. It's a relatively fast fighting time. It is super, it can easily punish ships effectively. Again, with that fuse time being 0.010 second fuse time. Again, meaning it has to penetrate less armor in order to fuse. So again, prime example. I think that's an enemy Koenig, right? Or is that a Congo? Again, I can't really see very well. But yeah, showcasing if you take full advantage of those broadsides, this thing can and will schwack the enemy. So yeah, the Koenig. I'm trying to think of some other tips I can really give in her that really helped me elevate my game. Again, it is only a tier 5 BB, and you can only talk about so much strategy and so much about the ship at these lower tiers. But another thing I guess I would do that I kind of mentioned earlier on in the video in the port analysis screen is making sure that you pre-aim your turrets, knowing where they're going to be at, especially with the Koenig. What is it, like 51-second time in regards for battleship turrets? I guess nowadays is considered horrendous. I guess it's like standard to be 30 seconds, which back in the day used to be like god tier. Which I mean, it is still god tier, don't get me wrong, but like every battleship now has that. And for the other battleships that still have, higher than average, um, it's very much painful for players. So, and I'd very much like to see that go back. Personally, I think that battleships should, because they have so much firepower, should reliably have to plan where their turrets are going to be placed, more so than cruisers. But whatever, wargaming has other ideas, I guess. So that should be something now for every other battleship I'm seeing. Hopefully they consider this and keep this in mind. But again, Bowen Rodney, overmatching him is not going to be that, we can't really do that. He has 25 millimeter nose. We only have, 305 millimeter guns. So instead we're shooting for the Rodney that's broadside behind him rather than the one that's coming nose in on us. Which I just think we're going to get better results than if we start shooting the one that's directly nose in at us. Plus he has torpedoes and plus he has a speed boost. So we don't want to go in and brawl for him. The secondaries on the ship. So this is something I want to highlight for you guys because people are probably going to be asking, well, Floppy, why not secondaries? Okay, so just to put it in perspective, your secondary range is only 5 kilometers base. I believe with a full secondary build, are you scratching 7 kilometers? I could be wrong on that one. If you're not, you're around that. The fire chance is roughly between 5 to 10% between the 105s and the 150s. And your secondary DPM is 174,185, which sounds good. But let's actually go to our secondary hitting DPM. So that's reliably how many shells you're hitting a game. In the realms of realism, in regards of game realism, you're only getting around 24,821 damage from your secondaries, guys. Unless players are absolutely mentally retarded and running at you, or just standing stationary, you're not really going to get too much use out of your secondaries. The only use that I found, a couple of games that I played with this ship when I tried running a secondary build to see if it was viable, was when destroyer players thought they were going to take a run at me, or I happened to catch those destroyer players with their pants down, and my secondaries did a little bit of work on them. Honest to God, every other ship you're fighting, you're mainly looking for the fires and fire damage, right? And it's just, to me, it's not really there. It says you're going to get around 17 fires a minute. I don't really believe that because it depends on how many shells you're actually hitting. which, as you can see, the hitting DPM is nowhere in the realms of where the secondary DPM is, theoretically by the number sheet, right? So it's one of those things where it looks good on paper, but when you get into game and when you have other players that have a brain and are moving and playing their ships at their best of their abilities, you really can see that they're not really made to be secondary ships. Back then, absolutely. 2016 or whatever, absolutely agree with you. You could probably get away with it a little more. And again, you could probably still get away with it here at Tier 5 if you're top tier, or even at a Tier 6 game. But when you get to Tier 7, with the other ships that are in the game that are actually secondary focused, like the Scharnhorst 43, the Lugdum, and all those kind of ships, like you're getting outclassed so heavily. Your best bet is to stay at range with those things and spam either HE or AP on their broadsides because there's just no way you're going to be effective in that scenario, right? One thing also that you see is you actually have no hydroacoustic search. You actually don't gain hydroacoustic search, I believe. Is it until the Ganesha now? Or is it the Bismarck? I'm not 100% sure. Can I double check that real quick? Yeah, it's actually the Bismarck. You don't even get it. So you're gonna have to. That's why I take one of my skills I took was, is it Vigilance? Is that what it is? The Tier 3 scale or Tier 2? Tier 2, I think, right? It's going to help you spot incoming torpedoes and reduce the damage by a little bit, like 7% or something like that. I don't know the exact numbers because I'm not having it in front of me. Just like you, I'm only human. I don't memorize everything, guys. um, but yeah, you're going to have to be aware of where the enemy torpedo threats are as well. Your ship doesn't turn particularly well. It has a larger or has a longer rudder shift time. Your turning circle radius isn't bad. So it says at 620, I said 680, somewhere around there. But your rudder shift time at 13.2 can be a bit of a disadvantage to you. So you're going to have to really be aware of that. And again, with these battleships like Scharnhorst, again, calling it out, the 43 or Scharnhorst OG, that ship has torpedoes, so that's going to be a nuke, right? So you're going to have to be careful when you find yourself in these bottom tier games because there are just so many ships that are just going to be flat out better at you in these brawling situations. So that's why I once and for all recommend you do not build for secondaries. I cannot stress this to you enough, especially for one of those players, I guess, as more of a free-to-play player or likes to min-max their commanders. Theoretically likes to bring their commander up with their ship that they're gaining. So like from the Kearney goes to the Bayern goes to Ganesha, you're bringing that commander with you. You'd be better off just specking a non-secondary. But see, the caveat here is when we get to ships such as the Bismarck, I do like to run a thing called a hybrid secondary build. And this is what I recommend that you do. Again, this should be nothing new to a lot of players. You might indirectly be doing this already. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit in our next video, which is right around now. Here we are in the second battle. Fucking rights. Here we go. Again, what I mean by a hybrid secondary build, I mean you're taking the necessary captain skills to obtain that secondary lethal status, or extending your range and doing more damage when you're locked on, right? But in that number 3 slot, you do not take the secondary battery mod, is it 2, I believe, which is going to do what? Extend your range by 20%, like dispersion, all that, blah, 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 and so on. So don't take that. You only have, what, 6 guns in the Ganesh, 8 in the Bismarck. Like, it would be stupid and foolish for you to actually do that, in my opinion. I don't think it's worth it. You need your guns to be landing, to be staying relevant in the game. But this takes me to my final point for these German BBs, which again, I mean, the second battle just started, but again, I want to stress because it's fresh in my mind and I need to state this. What these ships do better than the rest, other than damage mitigation, because realistically, they're not really damage mitigation. They're more like damage sponges. But what they do is they're a massive target that's enticing for the enemy that they want to shoot you. They can't resist. They have to shoot your ship. And with that being done, then that exposes them to your allies. And with your right mitigation of your armor, you can actually basically take the salvos that they're shooting at you and minimize it and saying, well, I'm glad they're shooting me and not strategic targets like my Des Moines or my Sve or anything like that that can actually has winning potential for us and game winning potential, right? And what's it called? Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. That is one thing I cannot stress enough, that these ships really do well. They really do. I would say most battleships should be doing that, but again, I'm really splitting hairs here when I'm trying to find relevance for these ships. And it's not a bad thing. Again, these ships they're not trashed here. They're definitely they definitely can still be playable and viable, but I would say these ships just aren't the most competitive. That's kind of the argument I'm trying to make for these ships, and I think you can all agree on that too. Um, Especially when you climb up the ranks, you will see that just more and more. There's just other ships that are either easier to play or just have more carry potential. That are just flat out better. And I hate to say that. I wish Wargaming would address this to some degree and give them more of an identity. But in the current state that they are now, this is kind of how I'd recommend them playing. And I've seen a lot of Reddit posts, a lot of Reddit posts saying how German battleships are useless. They're not even worth playing, not even worth grinding, blah blah and so and so. And I cannot strongly enough disagree with that statement. I think that's a stupid statement and really comes from an uneducated background and someone who just doesn't understand how these ships are supposed to be played. I think these ships 100% have relevance in the game. I think these ships can hold their own weight, but it's going to require way more game knowledge and if you build them right. I think a lot of players that are coming up with that conclusion that there's really no relevance for these ships anymore are building their ships completely wrong and or playing them completely wrong. These ships are not secondary brawlers. Notice how I'm not continuously sailing into the mix here. I'm not continuously sailing into the submarine and the was it Canaries and the other Koenig or Congo, whatever that is. I am sailing away. I'm sailing away. I guess you want to call this kiting if that's what you want to call it. I'm I'm kiting away with trying to get my turrets to bear because if I'm going in there, I'm dead. I'm 100% dead. There is nothing I can do to stop the inevitable, which is going to be death. Um, Again, if you're alive, that means you still have ability to help your team. If you're dead, your points have already been added to the enemy team's score, and you're fucking useless. So, um, you have to play smart with these ships. These ships require a big brain. I'm talking big brain play here, guys, not little brain. Not rushing in there, committing suicide, and saying, well, at least I traded, at least I did some damage, at least I got this guy. No, that's stupid. You don't want to do that, okay? You don't want to do that. So, as you just to kind of recap this gameplay, because I haven't really talked about the game, I've kind of been talking about the Koenig in general. The gameplay, as you can see, I went to go support my flank, but I'm trying to hover between running away, not really running away, but kiting away and then re-engaging, re-attacking. I don't want to abandon my allies. I want to make sure that I'm staying alive while keeping my HP pool at a reasonable level, while also trying to ensure their survival as well. At the end of the day, I'm going to be dealing with 2 DDs, a submarine, the Canaries cruiser, and another battleship. So again, how we're going to come out on top of this is if we play smart, we outplay them. We know that the torpedoes of the Farragut go what, 6.6 kilometers, 6.4 kilometers, right? 6.4 kilometers. We know that the torpedoes on the Gallant that's going to be showing up is 8 kilometers, and he has 2 racks of 4. We know this. So if we're keeping our ship at these distances where we can keep them at bay, we're going to do better. So, okay. So here we go. We have a Farragut rushing us from the middle, I believe. Notice how I fire my front 2 guns. I actually managed to get 4 shell hits, which is awesome. Again, aiming systems mod 1. And I'm immediately loading the HE. This is that situation you want to load HE. Because I know that if I hit him right with my secondaries doing work that could potentially incapacitate modules, HE is going to full pen him and potentially break or damage those modules fully. Again, he just fell off detection. You're damn right I'm going to take that blind fire. I know exactly where he's at. Take that kill, put it under my belt. Now I'm going to switch right back to the armor piercing, knowing that I'm dealing with the Farragut while turning out and knowing where the enemy's submarines torpedoes are coming in as well. I guess I unhomed them by doing my damage control party, and I'm angling away knowing that torpedoes from the Farragut potentially were coming, which they weren't. And now we have torpedoes from the Furataka coming. Torpedoes I definitely don't want to take. Again, what is it, 5 overpens, 2 penetrations, and one of those pens being a Citadel, enough to eventually have our Farragut gun down the rest of his HP and eliminate him from this game. It's something that I can't stress enough, because if I'm running a secondary build there, it would take twice, almost 3 times as long to kill that guy, and my guns have, I guess, instead of rolling a 6-sided die, I'm rolling a 20-sided die, depending whether or not I'm actually going to get penetrations and or Citadel ribbons. It's just something that I don't want. I want that ability, I want that consistency in my battleship a little bit more, and I just don't think the secondaries offer that. If the secondaries were Schlieffen levels, or I guess would be equivalent, would be what, like Heinrich or Derflinger levels, you know, we can sit here and have a discussion whether or not the secondaries are viable and whether or not specking into. But since they're not, and because you have a 26-second reload, I just think the best play for the Koenig, speaking solely for the Koenig right now, would be to build into her guns and her damage mitigation. Now, when I say build into her guns, what do I mean? Well, I just mean basically aiming systems mod 2. There's not, or aiming system mod 1, there's not really much you can do. I know there's that secondary brawler skill that like reloads your guns faster if you're within secondary range. There is an argument to be made for that, but again, you're having to get into this ridiculously close range with, torpedoes, submarines, aircraft carriers, just a bunch of shit that you just don't want to deal with as a battleship player, especially this Koenig German battleship commander player. And your best bet is just, again, building in the aiming systems mod 1, saying, no, I don't have any secondaries on my ship unless they're a last-ditch effort. I want to ensure the survivability of my battleship is priority number 1. So again, we're doing a little bit of a tactical retreat here, trying to utilize, because I was homed in with the homing torpedoes were homing in on me. They home in towards the island because I use this island as coverage. So now I can turn back out and I can engage. I've been landing a fair amount of splash damage on this submarine, so I can only assume he's, 3,000, 4,000 or less HP on the U-69. Again, we have AP loaded. Sadly, I would have loved to have HE loaded there, but AP happened again, land 3 shells, which again, if you're secondary build, you're probably landing 1, maybe 2. Again, it's only helping me out a lot, and that was with the back 3 turrets. So it's just something, again, I can't stress enough, that the aiming systems mod is just the way to go on the Koenig especially. And you're going to find this with all these ships, because the Ganesha now having 6, the Bayern having 8, the Bismarck having 8, the Frederick Gross having 8, the Preußen having 8, and having that overmatch potential with the 457s at tier 10. It's just something that you realize once you take a step back, you're like, this ship is so much more than a secondary brawler. And even calling it a brawler nowadays is kind of like, I wouldn't really call it that, because you're going against ships that are just going to be flat out better at doing that role. The Schlieffen, I guess the Ruprecht as well, if the Ruprecht's up tiered, the Libertad, the Los Andes, the Valparaiso, like just different ships that are just way better at the secondary brawling role. And your best bet is be like, you know what, if I stay outside their secondaries while having that damage mitigation with using my main guns, and hopefully my main guns hit more frequently, then you're really getting the most out of your German mainline battleships, guys. It's something that really opened my eyes was my clan mate. He was the one who actually led me to believe this, and I called him an idiot. I was like, bro, you're a fucking idiot. You play these ships to be secondary brawlers, and if you're not playing them as secondary brawler, you're just a meathead. And yet he was consecutively doing high damage games, getting E ranks on his tech line ships, and he is a I guess main tech line German battleship main, if that's what you really want to call it. And I was amazed, absolutely amazed with the damage he was doing, and I guess his impact to the battle was flabbergasted. And yes, it's something that I can definitely recommend wholeheartedly. That I guess the fun factor and the competitiveness of the ship definitely goes up. Now, I'm not going to say these ships are competitive, because realistically speaking, I already talked about this. There's just better ships out there. But you're going to make your ship more competitive if you build it this way. That's my opinion. And I found a great success in doing so. I did not find as much success building into a full secondary build. Matter of fact, I found a lot of, not success, little unsuccess, if you want to say, just because, again, you're trying to benefit from your secondaries, and most of the game isn't played in secondary brawling range with these ships, so you're not really benefiting from your skill. And even if you are benefiting, you're probably already half HP, right? So again, please take my advice. I really encourage you all to try this and see if you enjoy your mainline German battleships any more than you currently are, or if you're going down this line as your as your first line, or whatever it is, your first time going down this line. This is really going to help you be more impactful in your German BBs. And look at that, we come out victorious. Obviously, a little help from my friends here. Thank you for coming to support me. But again, we're still alive. We managed our damage control party very well. We managed our healing repair party very well. And we shot strategic targets, switching to the right ammunition types at the right times, and doing what we possibly can to ensure our team's victory. I believe this game was an E rank in the Koenig. Again, that's not a boast, it's not a brag. It's just saying that and showing you guys that this works. It allows me to acquire enough base XP to be in the top 1 percentile or whatever it is, to acquire that E rank, that expert badge or efficiency badge. And I really do hope that you guys take this for a spin too, and the advice that I'm trying to put forward to you guys, um, because it really does help. It really, really does help, and you'll get better results down the line, entirely down the line. And of course, we start with the kerning, but our goal is to go down to the poison. So, but as this video winds up, I think we just sail all the way to the middle and have submarines have a sub off, which is obviously a, want to rip your eyes out. Obviously I know it was a longer video, guys, but again, I'm setting the foundation for what this line is going to do, and I really think again, a longer video at the tier 5 is going to make for not quicker videos, but shorter videos compared to this one when we climb up the tech trees, as it's going to become a little bit more apparent what these ships do as you are gaining firepower. Especially with the Bayern, you already get 380s at the next tier, tier 6, which is going to be a massive advantage. So hopefully I'll go ahead and show that one here in due time with you guys. So anyways, I want to wrap up this video, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video when we cover whatever ship it may be, if it's be the Bayern, a premium ship, or whatever, guys. So anyways, stay tuned for more. You guys have a good one now, and peace out.